So Nick, could you turn off your camera and we'll wait when we introduce you?
All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our January SB 1383 Chat with CalRecycle. We appreciate everyone being here today. This month, we are focusing on jurisdiction container contamination monitoring programs. We have a wonderful group of panelists here to discuss their programs and start some conversations around contamination monitoring. Before the panelists begin their presentations, we will go over Q&A protocols, get some grant updates, and review some of the contamination monitoring requirements. We may still have some folks joining in from the waiting room, but we will go ahead and get started. Darren, if you can please go to the next slide. I want to go over a couple of webinar logistics to begin with, starting with a question and answer session process. Please type a summary of your question into the Q&A pane. While you may use the chat pane to share information or resources with other participants, please do not put your questions into the chat. If you do not see the Q&A pane, please make sure you have the most updated version of Zoom. Once called upon, please unmute yourself and state your name, affiliation, and restate your question when asked by CalRecycle staff. If it is geared toward a specific panelist, please note that we will make sure it gets to them. You may also ask for peer share requests, feedback, and panelist questions to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov. Using a subject like SB 1383 Chat with CalRecycle. If you cannot unmute yourself or are unable to mute yourself, submit your question. Please also submit those questions to the SLCP inbox, and we will have our land representative get back to you in a timely manner. Next slide, please, Darren. I will now turn it over to Michelle Martin from our Financial Resources Management branch. She is going to give us some grant updates.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I have some updates about some of our funding programs. The first is the SB 1383 Local Assistance Grant Program. Staff is in the process of reviewing those applications for the second allocation we received. There were about 380 applications submitted. We now will be awarding $110 million for this cycle. Awards are tentatively scheduled for March of this year. The next program is the Community Composting for Green Spaces Grant Program. We're currently accepting applications for this program. This cycle is focused solely on assisting qualifying tribal entities to create or expand existing community composting sites on lands owned, managed, or stewarded by tribal community members. Eligible grant projects include the creation, improvement, or expansion of community composting sites to increase composting of organics. All project sites must be located in California and on lands owned, managed, or stewarded by members of a tribal community. All project sites must result in the creation of new, improved, or expanded community composting sites. $510,000 is available for this cycle, and awards range from $25,000 to $100,000 per grant award. Applications are due next week on January 23rd. And then the last program, next slide please, is for the Organics Grant Program. We recently announced the approval of 23 grant awards, of which 9 were local jurisdictions. Over 130 million was awarded for new or expanded organics infrastructure that includes composting and digestion facilities. And here's a map that represents where those projects are located in California. There were 7 compost projects, 7 anaerobic digestion co-digestion projects, 4 standalone pre-processing, and 5 in-vessel projects. As a result of the projects recommended for award, 7.7 million tons of green and food material will be diverted from landfills, a reduction of 2 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in greenhouse gas emissions, and 114 jobs will be created. Thank you so much, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Next slide, please, Darren. Before we dive into our insightful panelists, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Adilene Gonzalez, an environmental scientist in the Local Assistance and Market Development branch at CalRecycle. As a subject matter expert for contamination monitoring, I'll provide a brief overview of the container contamination monitoring requirements. Monitoring containers for contamination is an essential part of a jurisdiction's collection services. To address contamination, SB 1383 establishes route review requirements for all 3+, 3, and 2 container collection systems. Keeping organics waste streams clean will help ensure that organic material can be processed, composted, or anaerobically digested. Reducing contamination will also help develop markets for recycled products in California. Contamination monitoring creates a positive feedback loop to create cleaner organic waste streams. Jurisdictions that provide a 3+ container, 3 container, or 2 container organic waste collection service must monitor contamination by conducting route reviews and/or waste evaluations. If the jurisdiction chooses to conduct route reviews, it must randomly select containers and ensure all collection routes are reviewed annually. The jurisdiction must educate residents and businesses if there is contamination identified in their containers on these route reviews. To assist jurisdictions with successful implementation, CalRecycle developed a document with best management practices for conducting route reviews. You can find the tool on our website, and my colleague Chelsea will be including the link to this document in the chat. If the jurisdiction chooses to conduct waste evaluations, they must be done at least twice per year in 2 distinct seasons to identify if there are any container contaminants. If there are more than 25% container contaminants in any container, then education must be provided to the residents and businesses on the evaluated routes. Thank you. Darren, if we can open the first presentation, please. With that, I would like to go ahead and get started with our first panelist, who will be introduced by our CalRecycle staff member, Jill Furge.
Hi, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce Sarah Vira and Mackenzie Jones. Sarah is the City of Folsom's recycling supervisor. She joined the city in 2022, and in her role, she oversees the administration and compliance recycling programs and directs a small team. Before joining the city, Sarah worked for private haulers in Northern California and the Pacific Northwest, as well as international nonprofit focused on sanitation. She has a master's degree in public policy and administration and has extensive knowledge of recycling legislation, program development and implementation, and sustainable behavior change methods. Mackenzie is a senior environmental specialist with the City of Folsom. She also joined the city in 2022 and works on Sarah's team implementing SB 1383 related programs. Mackenzie is skilled in education and outreach, record keeping, and community engagement. Prior to working for the City of Folsom, Mackenzie conducted field work for the United States Forest Service and conservation organizations in Indiana, Maine, and Northern California. Thank you for joining the webinar today, ladies.
Thanks so much, Jill. And thank you so much to CalRecycle for having myself and Mackenzie on the webinar. So this afternoon, Mackenzie and I will both touch on the City of Folsom's residential and commercial contamination monitoring. If you can advance to the next slide, please. To start, I'll provide a little bit of background information about the City of Folsom and our waste and recycling collection operations. The city of Folsom is a city of about 80,000 residents in Sacramento County. We are a part of the greater Sacramento metropolitan area, and our city is growing. We are filling out the Folsom Plan area south of Highway 50. And just last year, we added about 1,000 single-family homes to our routes, and we expect that growth to continue this year. However, most notable for our city is that we operate the waste and recycling collection. We have a staff of about 40 drivers and 9 administrative personnel, and together we collect all residential and commercial trash, recycling, and organics. We operate household hazardous waste collection and drop-off, bulky waste collection, and roll-off. Outside of this, we do have a couple of contracted haulers for commercial organics and C&D, but otherwise the city does a majority of the collection for all solid waste. And because we don't have many contracted haulers in our community, the route review task fell to me and my team. So we'll talk about that. Next slide, please. So my goal this afternoon is to provide some insight into how we planned and executed our route reviews in 2023. We did residential route reviews for the first time last year. And this is the list of factors that we were taking into consideration when we were figuring out how to make the route review work for our community and for our operations. This is the thing we found out pretty early on in our planning, is that there's really not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to route reviews. And we really needed to take into consideration the unique elements of our community and our operations and match our route review process to our specific needs. So first, one thing that was very important to us was we wanted to manage the public perception of the route reviews and be really transparent with our community, with our staff, and our city council. We also took safety into consideration, and we wanted our field staff to be really safe. Additionally, we wanted to minimize the impact on our operations team and choose a record-keeping technology and approach that is both compatible with the city of Folsom's internal record-keeping systems, as well as meet the implementation record-keeping requirements from CalRecycle. And we did go the route review method or approach instead of the waste audit approach, just because that met our operational needs best. And yeah, we did this once a year, and last year was our first year. Next slide, please. So I'll touch on communication and public engagement, as well as safety. So we wanted to be really proactive with our communication, and we wanted to let the community know ahead of time what we were doing out in the field. So we did this by working backwards. So we had our route review scheduled last year. We picked March of 2023. And we did a lot of upfront communication in the months leading up to the route reviews. The city has a weekly e-newsletter, as well as we channeled social media to inform residents about what we're going to be doing out in the field if they do see us. One thing that we did, which I thought was kind of the extra mile, was we created a PSA style short video. Our video was about 30 seconds long. And in this video, we showed residents what our staff will look like out in the field. We will be clearly identifiable, wearing high-vis vests with the city's logo. We'll also be, having our badges showing and carrying business cards, and just really explaining what we're going to be doing out in the field. And one of our goals as well was to really strike a friendly and educational tone. We wanted this to be an educational approach, and we really wanted to communicate that strongly to our community. We took safety into consideration, so we decided that we were going to tag in pairs. And prior to the route review, I had my staff as well take a code enforcement safety training. It was about situational awareness, and we really wanted to cultivate a safety mindset. So just being on the lookout for a variety of hazards that we could encounter in the field, as well as hazards that are unexpected. We also did a lot of communication internally with our customer service staff, our drivers, and our city council. So if residents, maybe they don't contact the waste and recycling division specifically, but if they contact other parts of the city, they knew where to direct questions and concerns. Next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of our route review tags. We were monitoring the 3-bin system, so the recycling, the green bin, as well as the garbage. We had 2 good job tags, or what we were calling our gold star tags, for recycling as well as for the green bin. These tags were provided to bins that had less than 10% visible contamination. Our OOPS tag is our generic tag for the recycling, the green bin, as well as the garbage if we saw something that wasn't supposed to go in there. And in these tags, you know, like I said, we wanted to strike an educational and friendly tone. The branding matches the City of Folsom's Waste and Recycling Division's brand guidelines, and it's really picture and informative, picture heavy. So yeah, like I said, educational, friendly was our goal. The red is a little bit alarming, but we still try and be helpful and informative on that tag. Next slide, please. So as far as the technology and the record keeping elements of this, we really needed our approach to fit with the city's internal database and our own processes here. We do, as I mentioned, we are the city's hauler, majority hauler, and we needed something that, works with our internal systems. We are, in the field at least, we're don't have a lot of technology yet out in the field. So we really wanted to focus on using our smartphones in the field and not use a paper tracker, because then we'd have to go back to our office and, re-enter the data. So we wanted to reduce those redundancies. We landed on a tool called Smartsheet to help us with record keeping in the field. And this is something that is compatible on smartphones. It is really affordable. We pay just a monthly subscription, which is really affordable. And Smartsheet is something that is customizable to meet the implementation record requirements. And it's basically an advanced Excel sheet that we customize to meet the requirements. And the key thing here is that we could use it out in the field using the tech that we already had, which is our smartphones. And after collecting this data, we could export it to Excel. And from Excel, we could enter it, import it into our internal database that we have, as well as save that document into our implementation record. So this is a key thing. Every operation is different. We needed to be efficient. We needed to reduce these redundancies, and we had to figure out something that worked for us. This was a bit experimental, but I'd say it was a good match. It might not be a good match for every jurisdiction and operation, but for what we had available to us, this is what we found to work. Next slide, please. As far as operations and routing go, we worked really closely with our operations team to execute our route reviews. And one of our main goals, as I mentioned, was to minimize the impact on our operations and collection team as much as possible. And this was really drawing a line of trying to find a middle ground of how we can meet the requirements for 1383, but at the same time, what works for our operation. And so we looked at all of our routes, and what we did was we, randomly selected areas. We were looking to include about 100 homes on the route, and we landed on this number because talking with our operations team ahead of time, we said, hey, how do we make this work? We'll have some impact, but how do we lessen that? And we decided on a certain time period that we would be tagging. So we'd start tagging at 7 a.m. and end at 8:30 at the latest. So we thought 100 homes is something that realistically we could tag with 4 staff members working in teams of 2 in about that time period. And 100 homes we thought was a good sample size and could give us a good idea of what contamination looked like on that route. So once we had those parameters set, we made all the selections on our routes, and I met with the drivers ahead of time at the start of the route reviews to explain really thoroughly what our goals were, how we were going to be doing it in the field. And basically our ask was, hey, you know, here's the map. This is the area that we're going to be working in. Can you not collect in this area or in this zone between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8:30? And luckily our operations team is really supportive and really collaborative, and our drivers were willing to oblige, and they just avoided that area. And when we were done, we just let them know, hey, we're done tagging, you know, go ahead and, you know, you can return to that area. Next slide, please. So I'll just wrap up here by talking about, you know, implementation and some lessons learned. With those 4 staff members, as I mentioned, working in teams of 2, we could tag about 90 homes in an hour or so. We found that the 7 to 8 a.m. hour worked really well. And it worked well because we found starting at 7 a.m. was the least invasive for our community. It wasn't too early. You know, maybe if we were making noise outside, we realized that, you know, we are living in a world of Ring cameras. And, you know, we did get some feedback from residents that just our movements outside of the home could set off their Ring camera. And the 8 a.m. hour is really when neighborhoods start to wake up and there's more traffic, people backing out of their driveway, more cars on the road. So we found 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. to be a good period of time where we could work effectively, stay safe, and be the least disruptive as we could be. Some other trends we saw, as far as the blue bin recycling goes, the city of Folsom has had a really long established curbside recycling program. And we saw a lot of good recyclables, but our most common contaminant is our recycling is bagged. So that is really valuable information that we'll take forward with our education and outreach for the city. As far as the green bin goes, with the organics program, we actually didn't see a whole lot of contamination. So that was something that was really promising and really encouraging for us. Some other considerations to take forward as we do route reviews. Again, we really want to think about the time of the year and weatherproofing our tags. As many of you across the state remember, we had a pretty epic winter last year, and we were doing our route review in March of 2023. So originally, with our every other week cycle, to tag all or to review all of the routes, it was going to take us 2 weeks to do it. But we got rained out many of these days. So it ended up taking us about a month, because with the every other week cycle, we'd have to go back 2 weeks later to work on that route. Weatherproofing and durability of the tags is really important. You know, we do tag in the morning, but if it's going to rain later in that afternoon, that tag, you know, wouldn't have survived. It also has to survive the tipping and the dump. So that is just something to think about. But overall, we found that the upfront planning, you know, taking into effect, you know, all of this unique considerations of our community really helps with the execution. Working in the community, we did find that some folks really appreciated us being out there. They take a lot of pride in their recycling, and they were happy to get the feedback and the recognition for the work that they do. Other folks thought otherwise, and we were prepared to have those difficult conversations with residents if, you know, maybe they thought it was government oversight, or just, you know, were nervous about safety, or a variety of other reasons. But it was really helpful to have that heavy communication ahead of time. And, you know, we could point to a paper trail if they had tough questions, and some of them did. And we, you know, we're prepared to be accountable to our community. Another key thing is that just the collaboration with our operations team was super important. And we're really lucky in our community that, or in our city, that we work so closely with our operations, and they're so willing to be supportive and understand the goals of what myself and my team are trying to accomplish. With that, I won't take up too much more of your time. Mackenzie, I'll pass over to her, and she'll talk about our commercial approach.
Next slide, please. Yeah, so like Sarah said, I'm gonna give a little peek into our commercial contamination monitoring. Yeah, so next slide. Thank you. So as Sarah said, something that's really important to highlight again is Folsom is the majority hauler. So that means, like she said, that we have very few authorized haulers for the organics route and for construction demolition. And I think it's really important to note, because it gives us a little bit more interaction with our drivers and a bit more control with how we educate our drivers and prepare our drivers for the contamination monitoring. So that being said, our drivers in the commercial sector note they have a responsibility to not only monitor, but report contamination along with service issues. And specifically when it came to driver training, what we wanted to highlight and prioritize our resources on was the organics program, because it was a newer program. Like Sarah said, we've had recycling in the city for a bit longer. So what you can see on our slide is a bit of a snapshot of our driver training document. So the city of Folsom has one commercial organic routes that service 4 days a week for 65-gallon carts. So that's one driver servicing the whole route, excuse me. So we're able to do a driver training with that driver that services our route. So the driver training kind of included talking about just what is organic waste, what's allowed in our program. It also went over our bagging requirements because we have specific ones to the city of Folsom. Additionally, that meant discussing with that driver contamination threshold. We have a 10% visual contamination threshold similar to residential route reviews. And then also in that driver training, we provided examples of possible contamination or contamination that he could see in the green bins. And so the document was a couple pages long. We worked with the operations team to educate that driver on the commercial organics route. Similar to commercial recycling and trash routes, the drivers are aware of what some common contaminations are in those waste streams and service issues, so they are aware to be able to report that. So you can go to the next slide, please. So we're going to first focus on our commercial organics contamination monitoring. So like I said, we have one driver that does that commercial route. And our technology is it's a paper route sheet still here in the city of Folsom. So that driver has that route sheet. You can kind of see a little snapshot of that on our slide as well, of where they will mark empty bins, contaminated bins, and bins that are not out. So that gets marked on that paper sheet. When we do have a contaminated green bin, I am sent an email either via email or text directly from that commercial driver to me, or even our recycle team email directly. And so when I receive that picture, I save it in our format and our files, and then I email the account holder on file from our database, notifying them of that contamination. Within that email, not only do we tell them about the contamination, we tell them that they have to either remove the contamination in 48 hours, or we're going to dump it as trash, and they receive a service fee. So we just wanted to clarify it's not a contamination fee. It's the cost for a trash truck to come and pick up that green bin. So they're notified of that as well. The email also includes outreach and education to the account holder. So it explains what the organics program is, what's allowed, and then provides materials to provide to tenants or employees to help educate. So we use it as a notification of contamination, but also outreach. So once the email is sent, we track it in our database, our internal database, as well as Smartsheet, and we mark it with a 48-hour reminder. So that allows me to know in 48 hours if we haven't received feedback or response back from the account, we'll dump the bin as trash. And like I said, we have one driver, 4-day route. So I get feedback on contamination 4 days of our 5-day work week in real time. So it's direct, can add up. So the reminders help us stay a bit organized with it. So that being said, we use this commercial organic contamination monitoring to help with our coach to compliance method here in the city of Folsom. So like I said, we use outreach in our initial email, but we also monitor the contaminated accounts very closely. So when we can start to see a trend, we can use that to know which accounts need to have site visits and outreach in person. And then also we provide technical assistance as a further step if an account or area has still not been able to understand what they need to be doing for the organics program. So it does lay the foundation for enforcement actions. It's the beginning part of it, as we know that the enforcement can begin this year. So we do use this contamination monitoring to understand what accounts need our priority in the city of Folsom. So yep, next slide, please. So yeah, we'll pivot to commercial trash and recycling contamination. So they have some similarities between the organics and some differences. So like I said, our drivers do monitor our routes and they provide feedback and reporting of any severe contamination and service issues. The key thing to note here is that a lot of contamination is interconnected with service issues regarding trash and recycling dumpsters. You can see some of our pictures like a sink in there or large furniture. So our drivers do contact our commercial admin with photos of any of that contamination or service issues. She will email the account holder similar to how I'll email the account holder for organics those occurrences are tracked in our database and in Smartsheet. And then businesses for trash and recycling, if it's a service issue that will not allow us to dump, like it'll damage our trucks, they have to remedy the service issue. But if it is a contamination, they can remove it. Most times they do dump as trash. That's the only difference too, is organics cannot be dumped contaminated. Our driver will not dump the organics, but in trash and recycling, they do have the option to pay that service fee and dump it as trash. Similar to organics, we do use this in our outreach and our coach to compliance method here in the city of Folsom. The only difference is that our admin will handle the direct contamination or service issues, but if it becomes a trend, that gets pushed back to our recycle team and we will handle the outreach, technical assistance, enforcement if needed. Yeah, so we wanted to preface here at the end that we use this contamination monitoring as to show that if they ever do get to the enforcement path, it shouldn't be a surprise. They've had many interactions, conversations, emails, outreach with us based on our monitoring of our contamination, that if that comes to that point, they'll be well aware of the path that set them on it. So that is the next slide. Yeah, so that's the end of our presentation. We appreciate you having us here and getting to learn a little about the city of Folsom. We love it here. If you have any questions, we can answer them now, or if we don't get to them in the webinar. We left our recycle team email. Multiple people have access it, so it's just a quicker response. And then Sarah Byra, our supervisor, has left her email and phone number. If anyone has questions about videos or driver training, we are more than welcome to answer questions.
Thank you, Sarah and Mackenzie, for that presentation. If we can pull up the Q&A protocol slide really quick, Darren. Thank you. So again, we will use a Q&A pane to address questions. Once we get your question, CalRecycle staff will unmute you. Please state your name, affiliation, and question. If you cannot unmute yourself, or if we are unable to unmute, get to your question by the end of the session, please send your question to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov. with the subject line SB 1383 chat with CalRecycle. I will go ahead and pass it to Katie.
All right, first up, we have a question from Claudia Vialta. Claudia, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question.
Thank you so much. Claudia Vialta. I work with a lot of I'm a consultant. I work with a lot of jurisdictions in the Monterey Bay area. I had a question on the driver contracts with contamination monitoring. Did the contracts need to be reassessed, or did the contamination monitoring, was that already included in their job descriptions?
Sarah, I don't know if Sarah wants to start talking first, or if you want to take that away, or you want me to answer it.
Yeah, I can jump in. So, yeah, our drivers, have always monitored contamination for us. We do understand that with 1383, we are asking them, more often to report contamination. So I don't know, I see that forthcoming, but we have not approached that yet. But it is, an expectation with our drivers that we do hold. As far as the route, or our commercial organics route, which we do a little bit differently, as Mackenzie talked about. With that route, we started that one new. It hasn't been like a long-standing route, and we work with that driver specifically with the expectations of reporting contamination. So no contract changes at the moment, but we do work with them really closely, and it has been an expectation from the beginning.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Our next question is from Laura McCoffin. Laura, you should be able to unmute yourself. Once you're able to, please go ahead and state your name and affiliation and ask your question.
Thanks, Catherine. Laura McCoyan, Alameda County Industries, ACI. Just out of curiosity, why you aren't able to service the organics as garbage? I thought that was kind of unique.
Yeah, sorry, I think I confused that when I misspoke. So we can dump it as trash. We give them 40 hours. But they're, for example, for trash and recycling, that contamination won't affect the type and the quality of the material as much as organics. So we can dump it as trash, but it will never be dumped as organics versus, does that make sense? with
I
that.
think I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that no level of contamination is permitted with the organics.
Yeah, we try to keep it no contamination. So, for example, pet waste happens often in organic span, and if it bin, sorry, and if there's one bag of that pet, we like hold a high standard for pet waste because of that biohazard versus I think for trash and recycling, the threshold is a little bit higher. We just don't allow any contamination. So we're a bit, I think, stricter on it, I guess is the better way to phrase that.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your question. Up next, we have a question from Susan Blackman. Susan, you should, keeps moving around. All right, Susan, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Once you're able to, please go ahead and state your name and affiliation and ask your question.
Susan Blackman, do consulting around the edible food waste space, mostly in the Bay Area. And actually have two questions. One is, just curious about what tools the commercial haulers use to photograph the contamination. Do they have to, is that something sort of attached to their vehicles, or they have to get down and do that? And secondly, have you asked any of the commercial organic haulers to see whether there's edible surplus food in the organic bins? Thank you.
Thanks, Susan, for the question. So we were speaking today about City of Folsom's specific commercial and residential processes for contamination monitoring. We do have a couple contracted haulers, and we work with them if there's contamination in the bin, but we were just highlighting our process. I don't hear very often if there's edible food being discarded, but that is something that our driver, we work with him really closely. So we get tons of feedback about the route, and is something that's unusual, and he would definitely share that with us.
Yeah, and to add, our drivers do have, our personal drivers have work phones so they can use to take pictures to text to the commercial admin or email to us. There's some preference from the drivers, and then our organics driver also is really great. And if he has a bin that's starting to become overfilled, he even notifies us of that. So we get to work really closely with that. So if we ever have questions about it, he'd be able to give us feedback.
All right, thanks everybody. We're going to hang on to the rest of these questions to make sure we have time for all of the rest of the presentations that we have planned for today. I'm going to go and pass this over to Adeline, and we will move on to the next presentation.
All righty, thank you for your questions. Darren, if you can please pull up the next presentation. We are now going to move on to our next panelist, who will be introduced by our CalRecycle staff member, Kathleen Strictly.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me. It's with great pleasure that I'm able to introduce folks from the Recycle Smart service area. First up, we'll have Judith Silver, who is a senior waste prevention and recycling manager at Recycle Smart and has been with the agency for almost 4 years. She's been engaged in the fields of resource recovery, waste prevention, and recycling for 35 years. She has experience working in local government, working for a hauler, for a paper broker, and as a sustainability consultant. Most recently, she has been working on SB 1383 implementation and compliance. And from SCS Engineers, we'll then have Laura Johnson, who is a sustainable materials management specialist at SCS Engineers. With SCS Engineers, she provides a wide variety of assistance focused around SB 1383 programs and compliance. She focuses on 1383 contamination monitoring and zero waste technical assistance. Thanks so much to both of you for coming today. And with that, take it away.
Good afternoon. I'm Judith. It's really a pleasure to be here. And thank you to CalRecycle for inviting us. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit about our program, and then Laura from SCS, our partner in this endeavor, will take over and provide some additional information. So next slide, please. So just to start off, our service area, we are in Contra Costa County. We have 6 member agencies, Walnut Creek, Lafayette, Danville, Orinda, Moraga, and a big chunk of unincorporated county as well. So next slide, please. So we have about 230,000 residents, and as I said, we have 6 member agencies, and we have a board of 2 elected officials from each member agency. We have about 2,000 commercial accounts and 67,000 single-family accounts and about 500 multifamily accounts. So you can see we're largely a suburban, very built-out sort of service area. And we use Republic Services as our main collector, and also Mount Diablo Resource Recovery, who processes our recyclables. So we have 2 franchises. They are in charge of all that happen here except for C&D. That's open market. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start talking about how we kind of got our program going. So we started with, actually, even before SB 1383, we were doing lid flips in our service area. We've had a 3-sort system in place since our current franchise went into effect in 2015. And we were doing lid flips for the organic sector using Compost Smart volunteers. Even that was happening even before I got here. So that really informed the development of our methodology. And the methodology, what we did was we hired SES back in 2021, actually, and they helped us kind of create a methodology document that I find is very helpful, and we've been refining it every time we've been going out into the field and learning new things. And we knew kind of right away that we didn't want to use our hauler to do that, the assessments for us. So we knew we wanted to use a third party for a number of different reasons, but that's sort of what we knew going in. And so we were working on this, developing this methodology, and we knew that we would pilot, test our kind of how we wanted to do the approach. At that point, we went to CalRecycle and just asked for their input, and they gave us great feedback as we were developing the document. So that was super helpful. We incorporated some of their suggestions, and that helped us as well. And so the document has been refined year over year. So one of the decisions that, if you're going to use a third party, or I guess in the city of Folsom, they actually are doing it in a specific period of time, but that's what we're doing. We're doing it in a specific period of time where we can get folks in the field. It takes a certain amount of time. Laura's going to talk more detail about, deciding how that all works. We had some concerns from our board about privacy. A lot of things that were discussed with the city of Folsom in terms of, we didn't want to put our residents off. We didn't want them to think we were going to be doing anything that was going to be, threatening to them or that they weren't going to like. We were very clear as well that this was going to be a positive and an information sort of opportunity for education, which I have found this whole program to be really wonderful. I wasn't really expecting to like it this much, but I find that it's very valuable. And even being out in the field at, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning when folks are out walking their dogs is actually really a great time to talk to people. And I've had some great conversations, and I'm sure Laura can talk more about that. So what we've also done is a lot of education to prepare our folks. And so we're like a JPA, we're one step removed. So we make sure that we tell all the member agencies and their police departments that everyone's got information, a letter that they're carrying, that they're well marked, that they're out there doing work at that hour of the morning. And we make sure that we have all that information on social. We're going out and letting people know before we're out there. And also that we have it in our resource guides that we put together every year for commercial and residential that we update annually. And as well as pushing it out through newsletters and e-newsletters that the member agencies, are working on every week that are going out from the city managers. So, there's no question that of education. One of the things that our board asked us not to do was to take pictures. So we just agreed not to do that. And so that's kind of unfortunate when we're trying to do feedback after the fact, but that's just a decision that we've made. The last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of our account selection. So we decided to do approximately 25 accounts per route. We have 69 routes. And our routes are organized for efficiency. They're not organized by, each a member agency. So a route in our service area could go in and out of 3 different communities. So in order to make sure that we get our threshold of 25 accounts, which was what we decided upon, which was basically borrowing that 25 accounts that are required for the waste evaluations. We just sort of took that number and said, okay, that's how many we'll do for the route evaluations. We also had to think about the fact that we couldn't just grab the most convenient 25 accounts, because we want to make sure that each member agency is represented kind of based on population, so that each member agency, let's say if we grab the most convenient 25 routes in Walnut Creek, but that's at the end of the route and we didn't get anything from unincorporated, that wouldn't be fair to unincorporated. So we embedded a kind of a population apportionment. So we're doing actually more than 25 accounts per route. We're doing closer to 35 or 40, so that we can make sure that we're sort of balancing not only the number of accounts, but the number of kind of the population per residential area. So I know that's probably not super clear, but I can explain that better. But I'm going to turn it over to Laura now to talk more about the details of how the routes are chosen.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll go into a little bit more of our approach in the finer details here. Judith did touch on that kind of service area population is a big factor in why we're selecting different areas on these routes, because there's 6 member agencies. They are crossing into multiple different jurisdictions. And so we're just trying to make sure that we are doing a representative sample of what the population is for the JPA. So we are taking a look at population as well as the day of collection. We don't want to load up a Monday and make it a really hard 12-hour day and have a light day. So we're trying to make sure we're selecting by area and by day of collection. And Judith already talked about kind of that 25 accounts. We do like to make sure when we're working with the hauler to request a buffer of, depending on residential versus commercial, 15 or more accounts on top of the 25 to provide a buffer of, in case you're coming across accounts that are not set out, someone's on vacation, isn't home that week, or if it's empty, any kind of service issues you might come across in the field, that buffer is really useful. And I think one lesson that we have really learned is working with your haulers, if you can get as much access information from them on gate codes, or if there's a key that's necessary, that can help you a lot, because sometimes you're going to be in a private neighborhood, you might need that gate access code to get in. So that's a lot of information that the hauler has. Just make sure you're requesting that early, because it'll be super useful to you in the field. We can go to the next slide. Okay, a little bit more of the details. Judith did mention there are 69 total routes, so that's including landfill, recycling, and organics. And so in order to kind of complete all of those routes, we like to do it within a 1-week period. So we do have 2 teams of 2. We like to do a pair just for the sake of safety, because they are going out early before the residential trucks are starting around 5 a.m. So it's typically dark out still, and for safety reasons, if someone's poking around, you just never know what's going to happen. So we do pair up, and it's really efficient to do it in teams as well. And we found kind of our average number of routes that a team can do within a day is about 9 routes. And that's including landfill, recycling, and organics. Some days more or less, just kind of depending. And I did kind of touch on the start time. So for residential trucks, we're going out an hour before they start their route. We're really trying not to interfere with the collection services. So we're not asking the trucks to avoid certain areas unless we absolutely have to. We just want to get out there before the collection actually starts. And then for commercial routes, we actually do their inspections the day prior to servicing. For Recycle-Smart, Republic Services is one of the haulers, and they start their commercial routes around 3:30 in the morning. So instead of trying to go at 2 o'clock in the morning, we actually are doing it the day prior. And that's hasn't been an issue so far in terms of access. Most of the time, these bins are stored in the parking lot and we can still get into the bins just fine. And you still have plenty of material to view typically because it's the day prior. And then we also are making sure that our teams are supplied with a field letter that's provided by Recycle Smart. That's just letting everyone know, just in case they come up to us to ask what's going on. It tells them who we are, what we're doing, and if they have kind of additional questions, it gives them some contact information that they can give a call to. But like Judith said, the police departments have been notified. Everyone's aware of what we're doing. And we never truly have come across, in my experience, I might knock on wood, anyone that's been upset truly with us being in their front yard, digging through their trash. It's more just like an educational, hey, what's going on? We let them know. And it's sometimes a conversation spurs and they ask questions about like specific things they've been wondering about. So it's been very educational and less kind of as hostile as you might assume. And then the last tool that we make sure the team has access to is a Recyclist. It is a all kind of encapsulating database. Specifically, they have a 1383 dashboard that we use for the container monitoring. And that's where we can capture all of the information and log if any of the follow-up is needed or has been distributed to each account. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so more about kind of what we're doing when we're doing the lid flips. When we're at an account, I personally, and this is how we kind of communicate with our team, like to go from organics to recycling to trash. Typically, what you don't see in the organics, so if I'm not seeing any food scraps, I might assume, okay, that might be in their recycling or their trash. So I kind of work my way up to the trash. And what we do is we take a visual kind of assessment of that top available material. Sometimes you do have to open that top bag, especially for the landfill containers. And we're just trying to separate it out into quadrants to kind of visually break it down to make sure we're getting an accurate representation of the contamination percentages. And one thing we do like to make sure we're doing is getting everyone that's going to be going out into the field. We do kind of a training first route all together, make sure we're having a standardized approach, make sure we're kind of discussing, oh, if I see this as 50% contamination, you see it as 60, let's kind of see where we can communicate and kind of get a common ground on that. And then we standardize and get everyone out to their separate routes after that. So I would definitely recommend that as well. And then once we're at the field, we have Recyclist on our mobile phones. So you're able to log all of that information in real time. One thing when working with kind of a mobile app, it can crash, it can lose, connection. So one thing we always are sure to do is have a physical copy backup, just for the case that you lose access, you don't want to be stalled out in the field, so we can continue to move forward. And let's go to the next slide. Okay, so our follow-up communication, we Recycle Smart and SCS kind of decided to do two different approaches for residential versus the commercial and multifamily. So for residential, we are doing those cart tags. So it's a variety of oops tags and great job tags. And those are put on every cart. So if there's one tissue out of place, we're leaving an oops tag to let them know. And then typically I would say we left a lot of great job tags on organics. That seemed to be a common theme. People know that their yard waste should be going there, so that we did deliver quite a few great job tags, which is good to see that people are properly sorting. And then the commercial and multifamily, we kind of decided after doing some of the piloting that leaving an oops tag on a commercial bin wasn't necessarily communicating the proper sorting to the person that's actually maybe the cause of the contamination. So we chose to do follow-up phone calls, emails, and site visits instead to try and make sure we're communicating that to the owner, the property managers, kind of the decision makers that are going to be able to communicate that to their staff, tenants, and residents. And we did find this past year was the first time we decided to move forward with in-person site visits to follow up for this commercial and multifamily. And those were really impactful. A lot of people just wanted to have a space to have a conversation about their specific materials that they're using. A lot of times they're asking, oh, is this supposed to go here versus there? And you could just tell it was kind of a light bulb was clicking, and it felt like we were actually connecting those dots for people, which was great to see. And we'll go to the next slide to see a couple of examples of cart tags. So these are the OOPS tags that were used in the field. You can mark on them and kind of circle what are the common contaminants. And one thing that I really enjoyed about these in the field is having those pictures kind of pre-ready so the team can just quickly circle instead of having to write in any of those contaminants, because that can slow you down in those early hours. One thing with these tags, we didn't have a lot of issues with the rain. Surprisingly, they had more of kind of like a sheen to them, so it seemed to repel water for the most part. But I would say to always consider adding a buffer of time to avoid the rainy days. It's kind of hard to, but everyone's miserable if you're out doing rainy day sorting. And then on the next slide, we have another example. Okay, so these are the great job tags. Very similar. They also still include proper sorting, because you might get a great job tag on your organics for having all yard waste, but we still want to communicate to them, next time let's start including food scraps. That's kind of an example of something we've seen. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, and these are kind of the results from this past year. It's just a list of some of the common contaminants we found. I think it's no surprise to folks here that organics was the most commonly found in the garbage. So that's something that we'll be hopefully focusing on in the follow-up communication throughout the rest of this year. And then also, similar to the city of Folsom, mixed recycling, they found that it was clean recyclable, but it was bagged. So that's some communication that needs to be kind of distributed to the residents to kind of communicate, you're doing well, except let's keep these unbagged. So yeah, these were all some observations based on, we touched about 2,200 containers. And then we'll go to the next slide, and I'll pass it back to Judith.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. Yeah, I mean, this is just more of a summation. I think the biggest thing, we added the second metric over time. Now we've done this over 3 years. And we added the second metric for account selection. We added the follow-up email. And then this last time, the actual site visits, follow-up site visits, which, as Laura said, were super valuable. It's really great to have, face-to-face communication when you can. Obviously, the advance notice of field work, and then the program recommendations that come with the final report are very helpful. Things like we're still seeing a lot of food scraps in the garbage, even if they're seeing, that the yard trimmings are in the right cart. So something that we can focus on. And I think another observation, the recyclables are being bagged, and that there's a lot of paper towels in the recycling, and we would rather those were in the compost in our green carts. So that's essentially, the big takeaways, and gives us good guidance on our path forward. And with that, I'll conclude, and you can go to our last slide. And we'll take questions if there's time, or as directed. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith and Laura, for your presentations. With the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next panelist, but please feel free to continue sending in your questions for the panelists that have presented, or if they're directed at CalRecycle staff. We'll be doing a group Q&A session at the end of the chat. Next, we're going to have our CalRecycle staff, Kathleen Strictly, introduce Oakland City and Zabo.
Hi again, everyone. From City of Oakland, we have Rebecca Parnes, and from Zabo, we'll be hearing from Nick Balachandran. First up, Rebecca Parnes has worked in waste reduction and recycling for over 15 years. She started in the field leading tours of the local transfer station for fourth graders in Alameda County. Next, she worked for Waste Management for 9 years, starting as a recycling coordinator and ending as a municipal program manager. 7 years ago, she transitioned into government, working for the City of Dublin. She currently works for the City of Oakland as a Recycling Program Specialist 3, where she oversees their 2 franchise agreements for trash, recycling, and compost collection, implementation of SB 1383, and implementation of a new reusables ordinance. Following Rebecca will be Nick Balachandran from Zabel. Nick is an electrical engineer turned entrepreneur who found his passion to keep trash out of the environment after encountering it during open water swimming and hiking expeditions all around the world. He founded Zabel in 2016 to help organizations reach zero waste by championing a novel waste measurement process and software platform using AI to streamline operations and engage stakeholders. Nick is a true zero waste advisor, a former board member of the Northern California Recycling Association, known as NCRA, and actively participates in local cleanups and zero waste advocacy. Thank you both for being here today. I'll let you go ahead and start sharing.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for having us. So I'm Rebecca Parnes with the City of Oakland, and a lot of what I'm going to cover today is similar to what other folks have discussed, but some of it diverges. So the City of Oakland is unique in that it is fairly high population, high density. We have a number of businesses, a number of old multifamily housing, new high density mixed use housing. So if you move on in the slide, we have about a fairly large population, 433,000 people, about 100,000 single-use dwellings and about 83,000 specific locations. We have about 700,000 multifamily dwelling units and growing, with about 3,500, excuse me, specific multifamily properties. And then we have about 5,000 commercial trash pickup locations, which could be multiple businesses using the same containers. Another thing that is unique to the City of Oakland, next slide, is that we do have multiple haulers. So we have a franchise agreement that covers residential and commercial trash collection, which is provided by Waste Management. Our single family and multifamily recycling is franchised, provided by California Waste Solutions. And then our commercial recycling is open market, but mainly Waste Management, California Waste Solutions, and Civicor are the main 3 service providers. And because we have a big diversity, or we have a diversity in haulers, it's not just one, that made it a lot more appealing to do the route audits ourselves or using consultants, just because each of our service providers has a different practice, different method, and a number of them already do review the contents of the containers before they service them, leave their own contamination tags, and that's established in both our trash and compost franchise as well as our recycling franchise. And then in the open market sector, it's up to the hauler how they want to communicate with their customer, but there is already a number of proactive communication. But because of the diversity, we wanted to monitor it ourselves to get a deeper understanding of what was actually happening in the field. So on the next slide, you can see we have a number of routes, 87 single family routes, 12 multifamily routes, 35 commercial routes. And next slide, the City of Oakland also contracted with SCS engineers to kind of oversee our route reviews and establish the methodology. So a lot of what Laura described, they did with Recycle Smart. There's a similar approach in the City of Oakland. And we did route audits or route reviews in 2022, partnering with SCS, but at that time we also had about 20 Climate Corps fellows working in the City of Oakland, and we had all of our Climate Corps fellows as the field staff doing the audits. And that was a good learning experience for them and for us. But working with so many youth starting their professional careers made us want to kind of shift to a more reliable employment pool. So the city of Oakland has a long-standing working relationship with CivicCorps, which is also a youth job training program. And we decided to try and partner with them this year in 2023 for our route audit. So SCS helped facilitate training for CivicCorps, who did the infield audits of all the routes. So they weren't just auditing the routes that they collect, they audited the single family, multifamily, and commercial routes throughout the city. And we were interested in that partnership because they are a local based conservation corps that we already had an existing relationship with. And because we thought it could be a service that once they provided it for Oakland might be a new service they could potentially provide to other cities in the area. And we plan to work with them in 2024 as well. So that partnership worked out. Similar to other cities, we did use a digital platform to track what we were finding in the field. In 2022, we were using Recyclist for all of our 1383 record keeping, and we used them for our field audits as well. And then in 2023, we're no longer using Recyclist, so we needed an alternative platform to track route review activity. And we used Zabel for the first time in 2023. Nick is going to talk a little bit more about how that platform works functionally and what you can see after the fact once you've completed your route review, and how the data that's tracked is, I think, fairly easily accessible. So similar to other cities, I overlooked creating a slide about this, but safety is also a big priority when we're doing these route reviews. We want everyone in the field to be safe while they're conducting them. So we did a lot of proactive education using the methods that other cities use, council members, newsletters, Facebook. And we also did press releases because Oakland is a slightly larger city. We actually have a local news source, Oakland Side, that many folks read, and they did a story after the route reviews happened. And this year, we also let them know they were happening again, and they did a little news coverage about it, which I think was a really effective way to get the word out so that folks weren't surprised when they saw someone at the curb. And if they were, similar to what RecycleSmart had, all of our auditors had a sheet explaining who they were and why they were there, which they did use sometimes. Moving on to the next slide. So we followed a similar methodology, looking in just mainly the top of the containers. We also would leave behind tags, letting them know if they did a great job, letting them know what areas for improvement were needed. Our cart tags show two colors because we're doing the slow transition of cart colors to compliance. And there's more of our old colors in the field than the new colors currently. So that's why those are there. This year we added the QR codes, both for just getting to the Oakland Recycles website, and also Stop Waste has a really great resource guide, which you can search for kind of how to manage anything. So we put that on there to help folks know what to do with their material. These cart tags only go on single family customers. Next slide. For our multifamily properties and our businesses, they receive letters after the fact, letting them know what items were observed as contamination and where that material belongs. For 2024, in addition to having a letter that goes out to businesses and multifamily properties that have done the wrong thing, we're also planning to have a follow-up letter that goes out to businesses and multifamily properties that we observed doing the right thing. Because some of our auditors found that they were having conversations specifically with multifamily properties where there were managers who were super engaged and wanted to know what was observed and were really excited to hear that they were doing well. So we want to be able to facilitate feedback and encouragement, because it's definitely not easy to get your multifamily property on board with our programs. So I think that'll be a nice next step, because you almost never hear from someone telling you you're doing the right thing. So we're going to do that in 2024. Another thing that we have done with our audits, just from a logistical standpoint, is try to time them in line with the daylight savings. So we did it in the fall right before the clocks changed, and this time we're going to do it right before they change back to maximize the amount of daylight hours so that when we're out in the field, we're not actually out in the dark. We do start at 6 a.m., but when we coordinate for daylight savings, it has worked out. So that just adds to safety. Moving to the next slide, please. So similar to everyone else that's spoken, plastic bags are by far our #1 contaminated item. That was the case in 2022. That's the case in 2023. So we've done additional education as a result of this finding. It's the #1 contaminant residentially and commercially. The little graphic of the plastic bag is a 20-second video that we created that we're putting on YouTube and other social media platforms. We have it in English and Spanish and traditional Chinese to educate folks that plastic bags are trash and that it can contaminate their recyclables and compostables and make them end up in the trash. With California Waste Solutions, our recycle service provider, we did a segment on ABC7 around the holidays, and the first thing we talked about was not using plastic bags for your recycling, not using plastic bags for your compost, and that plastic film is trash. And it's also informed the bill inserts and social media posts we do. So the bottom panel is a bill insert we did to commercial customers specifically around bags. And I anticipate that's going to continue to be a theme in our education moving forward because it is the #1 contamination that we find across the board. On to the next slide, please. And that's it. So I'm going to hand it off to Nick to talk a little bit about how the Zabel platform works and some of the findings that we came to after our route audit that were demonstrated to us through the Zabel platform.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick Balachandran, founder and CEO of Zabel. First of all, I'd really like to thank Rebecca for giving us this opportunity to work with the city of Oakland. And if you can tee up my slides while I give the a quick intro. There you go. And then thank you. And then CalRecycle for inviting us so we can share our work. I think I am going to have the highest next slide count here. So I have 30 slides. So I'm going to quickly go through them as fast as I can. Next slide, please. So a little bit about Zabel, if you haven't heard about us. We're a 9-person tech company based in Walnut Creek in Northern California, but our footprint is national. And so is our impact. Our mission is to help organizations achieve zero waste by delivering real-time actionable insights using AI. And we've created 2 products to help with that objective: invoice analytics and mobile tagging, to help quantify operations from the point of disposal to the point of hauling. That's our scope. And we've received 4 awards from the US EPA to help develop this technology, bring in AI into the hands of jurisdictions and generators to help advance the recycling infrastructure in the US. Next slide. So we have several clients from large educational and health institutions to corporations, nonprofits, and now recently we're working with cities. Next slide. What we have created for contamination monitoring for jurisdictions is called mobile tagging. It allows you to upload all your account information, such as addresses, bin info, service levels that are automatically geocoded and appear on the mobile app in the map. It also functions with little or no internet. It also allows you to scan an image and leverages computer vision AI to in live mode to classify how full a bin is and identify items. And you can also move the phone around to solve the problem where you're only looking at the surface. Because it's live, you can kind of move around and it'll keep tracking things. And then you can notify key stakeholders, whether it's businesses, residents, haulers, and sort of create customizable incidents and contamination and send them email notifications. And finally, the goal is to measure outreach campaigns, whether it's changes in contamination or compliance with 1383. Next slide. So now let's get into the details of the project. So Rebecca contacted us. She was looking for a standalone solution for contamination monitoring that was user-friendly in the field, that was really important and worked without any issues under different conditions. And so they not only needed something that was cost-effective and within budget, but also wanted a partner who was willing to build a program alongside them that is curated for their city and based on their inputs and feedback. Next slide. So how did it turn out? So despite an initial learning curve on the first day or two, the app helped them reduce their route review time in half compared to previous methods. And that was anecdotal information that was shared through one of their field staff. The city was able to test and validate their hypothesis to build targeted contamination education campaigns that Rebecca talked about, but I'll show you the data on it, and then ensure compliance with 1383. Next slide. So now I'm going to go through each of these sections and give you a glimpse of the insights that can come out of conducting route reviews. And most of the charts were pulled directly from the dashboard, unless a couple of them required a deeper dive. And it was automated in the sense that once someone is in the field and tagging information in the app, the data appears or the aggregates appear automatically in the dashboard for a manager to view the statistics. Next slide. So besides Rebecca and the city staff, we worked with SES and Civic Corps, who were also involved, and they were an amazing team to work with. The SES folks got the data, imported them into the Zabel app through the help of our customer success manager. And so the SES folks did the sampling and then selected the accounts per route, sent us the information. So it took about less than a week from the time they sent us the files to the time we started conducting the trainings. And if you're a single hauler jurisdiction, then you can upload the data yourself from the web platform, and then the accounts automatically get geocoded and appear in the mobile app. And you can see sort of the inventory capacity, the information that's being shown here. So almost 7,300 bins were audited or inspected in over 2,700 properties, and you can kind of see the breakdown of the properties. Next slide. And you can also see it on a map. So Rebecca was able to see sort of the routes and kind of dive deeper into them and see how they were kind of spread out within a route. Next slide. And then Rebecca was able to onboard 18 users from the city of Oakland, Civic Corps, and the SES staff by herself. Zabel did the trainings and on how to use the app, and we went over typical questions and workflows. And then we were available early in the morning and over the weekend to answer questions and troubleshoot while the folks were in the field. Next slide. And so this is how it looked for the field team. So they had access to the account info and bins on a map, even when they were offline. So all they had to do was hit the scan button that's a purple button on the bottom right to launch the camera and the API. The AI. Next slide. And so the AI automatically understands the fullness and sort of populates that on the screen, and then also identifies objects in real time. Next slide. And then it sort of selects some of those items for you. And then you can also additionally select any other incidents for real-time notifications or follow-up. And I'll go into how the performance was for each of these things. Next slide. So as the folks are out in the field, Rebecca was able to get a bird's eye view of the accounts, the routes per day, based on generator types, so that she could keep track progress towards her goals. Next slide. So we want to really be transparent and kind of share how the AI performed in the field. So essentially, what I'm showing here is that the AI suggests the fullness, but if it was off, the user can adjust the slider. And we looked at the difference between the predicted value and how the user adjusted that slider. And what we found was in 90% of those cases, the difference was less than 25%. And in 78% of the cases, the difference was less than 10%. And next slide, please. We did a similar analysis with object detection or the item detection. The algorithm does two things. So it either identifies the item and then selects it automatically for you, or it suggests the item if it's not sure about it. Now, it can even be wrong. Even if it's 100% sure, it could still identify the wrong item, and those are false positives. So our benchmark for this was how often is a user typing to note down contaminants while at the bin. And what we found was over 83% of the time, there was no typing involved. It was either the item was automatically being detected and the user either had to tap to select it or tap to unselect it if there was a false positive. So for example, in snack wrappers and cans, that was minimal in terms of the typing and the auto tagging was high. In terms of wet cardboard, it was falsely identified in many cases and the user had to deselect that. And ultimately, where we're going with this is to have auto tagging be right most of the time, so the user doesn't have to, type or tap on any of the buttons, and they can just quickly scan and move on. Next slide. Another area that we wanted to set some benchmarks was in how long did it take the field staff to do the lid flips. We heard earlier in the presentation about 90 accounts in a couple hours, but what exactly is that number? And we kind of have this intuition, or we know for a fact, right, that single family takes less time than multifamily. But how much longer is multifamily or commercial? So we found that on average it took 1.9 minutes for a single family lid flip of all the bins, versus 4.4 minutes on average for multifamily and 7.6 minutes for commercial. So hopefully this sets the stage for future evaluations of this types of logistics to help improve the processes and benchmark them. Next slide. So from now, let's move on to insights that can help drive effective outreach and education. Next slide. So first up, contamination. So you can look at contamination as a whole, as you can see on the left. So you can get this aggregate sense for landfill contamination, which was the highest across the board, 32%. And then recycling contamination was the lowest at 11%. And then as you drill down on the right, now you start to see how is it broken down by different generator types, right? So now you can see single family contamination on the whole was significantly lower than commercial contamination on the whole. And compost contamination was significantly lower than the other types of contamination. Next slide. And Rebecca, whoops, I guess it's stuck. Are you loading it up again?
Yeah, give us a second. Darren should be trying to pull it back up. Okay, then give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen so that I can prompt the continue your presentation. Give me 1 second.
Okay. If everyone else.
Is that better?
It's better, but I guess it has just these gray blocks for some reason. Didn't seem like it was on the slides.
I'm not sure.
Would you be able to like stop sharing or go back to the slide show and then come back? I can share my screen too if that works.
Okay, I think you should have the ability, Nick, just because you are a co-host, so you want to try doing it on your end?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Can you see my slides? Can you see the screen?
Yes, Nick, you're good.
All right, thank you. So I think I stopped here, so I'll just go back and I don't know how much of this came through, but essentially you can look at contamination as a whole on the left. So you could see that landfill contamination was the highest at 32%, and recycling contamination was the lowest at 11%. And then you can kind of drill down into what were the different generator types and how did they influence the contamination percentage. So on the right-hand side, you could see single family contamination was by far, significantly lower than commercial and multifamily contamination. And then within the different streams, compost or organic contamination was lower than the other streams. So you can really get down to this type of granular information to help with the outreach and education. And so Rebecca wanted to go one step further and see how severe contamination was across the generator types to further hone in on those accounts where she wanted to maybe send good job tags, or those where she wanted to send oops tags or notices of violation. And so you can clearly see the difference between the generator types and contamination levels. So for instance, 21% of the commercial accounts, so the orange and the red bars make up 21% of the commercial accounts, and they were over 40% in contamination. As opposed to single family on the left-hand side, it was just 2% of single family accounts that were over 40% contamination, right? So this can really help kind of narrow in on some of the outreach efforts. On the other hand, you can also look at it on a map, right? If you wanted to see geographical hotspots in contamination. So the size of the bubble here indicates how contaminated the bin was, and the different colors are the different generator types. So you can see around Lake Merritt, right in the middle, you see a whole bunch of businesses in brown. They have really large bubbles, as opposed to single family, they're the yellow ones that have the smaller bubbles, which we already know from the earlier that I presented, that single family contamination was lower than commercial contamination. So you can kind of see it in different ways. And then finally, you can kind of see the distribution of the contaminants, right? And how often were they found and in each, in a route or across the bins. And so Rebecca kind of had a hunch for plastic film and bags before they even started. And the data kind of confirms that that was the case with the recycling and organic streams. And then with her targeted outreach with the video, that's sort of how she's closing the loop with targeted education on plastic bag contamination. And then we did a similar analysis for how full were bins across the generator types to see if capacity was matched during collection. And typically the bin fullness, as you can see, was between 50 and 60% throughout, but the organics bins were slightly lower. This was right before collection, so it's a really good indicator of how full the bins were. And so it gives you an insight into how you can sort of adjust the service levels, or when you go out and you're speaking with customers, that you have sort of a sense for how the generator types are performing. And then finally, you can look at incidents that were created in the field. These were real-time notifications to quickly communicate with stakeholders and to alert them with the right incidents. And then what this really tells you is getting into the notes and understanding what were some of the typical concerns that are being brought up by the field staff. And I think Laura mentioned this earlier as well, that there was issues with gaining access to buildings, and especially in Oakland where dumpsters are locked up. It's not a surprise to see that was the biggest issue that stands out. And so this can kind of help on a daily basis as you're planning for your accounts or helping design how you want to go about reaching building managers and sort of preemptively helping alleviate some of these problems. And lastly, this is why we're all here today, compliance. So let me quickly give you a sense for how the metrics, when they start getting aggregated as someone is out in the field, they're collecting the information, you start to see these dashboards visually populate, and you're starting to see that they're telling you a story. They're telling you a story about how the city is doing across this little sample. Even though it's little, it's really important to kind of see how the contamination, what the insights you're getting out of it, how full the bins are, and how well are the residents or businesses participating in your program. So you can see all this information in one place. And for the route review perspective, for the EAR perspective, you need the number of routes inspected, and you need the notice of violations. And so you can see all that information here, and you can easily upload it. You can also download these spreadsheets right away or these tables right away in Excel, and you can sort of use this for your implementation record, and these can be customized for your jurisdiction. So really just want to conclude for us, what's next with route reviews is, I think technology is going to be playing a bigger role in helping the government be more efficient in data collection and insights, and helping create and enforce policies. AI is real, it's here, and if used correctly to help humans, I think it could be a huge benefit. Benchmarking is really critical because you're going to do this every year. So it would be really great for every city to start benchmarking their data, so you could compare yourselves to your own performance and figure out ways to make them more efficient. And resource allocation, allocating your resources based on what the data is telling you, using contamination frequencies, the hotspots across the routes, material types is really going to help you hone in on those problem areas, or the comment folks and then be able to send out those outreach material. And then finally, although the immediate focus is contamination, the information is available at your fingertips for data-driven outreach and enforcement programs. So I'm personally excited to see where things go in the next few years in California. And if you are ready to be more efficient in data collection with the latest technology and drive outreach, feel free to use the QR code, contact us via email. I'm happy to talk more and get into more details or answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, thank you, Rebecca and Nick, for your presentations. Again, with the interest of time, we will move on to our final panelist. Please feel free to continue to send in any questions for the presenters or CalRecycle staff using the Q&A pane, and we will go to them during a group Q&A session at the end of the chat. I have the pleasure of introducing our next pair of panelists, Ridgecrest, who will be presenting alongside Waste Management. They are represented by Megan McKenzie and Bradley Sia. Representing the city of Ridgecrest is economic development analyst Megan McKenzie. Megan graduated with a degree in environmental science and natural resource management from Humboldt State University in 2014. Born and raised in Ridgecrest as a third-generation local, she joined the city staff in 2021 as an administrative analyst, and since then has been working on a variety of projects, most notably acting in the leader role for the city's implementation of SB 1383. The city of Ridgecrest is the only incorporated township in the Indian Wells Valley of the Mojave Desert with a population of approximately 28,000. The isolated location and extreme desert environment offer unique challenges and opportunities to address the requirements of SB 1383. This has led the city to explore innovative approaches to sanitation programs through their partnership with Waste Management. Brad Sia spent the last 7 years of servicing as Director of Sales and Public Sector Services for Waste Management's Northern California and Nevada market area. In these roles, Brad had direct leadership for the open market and franchise governmental sales teams. He also played an integral role in deploying Waste Management's smart truck technology in the Northern California area. Prior to joining the team in Northern California and Nevada, Brad led the inside sales channel for Waste Management. In his new role, he serves as an SB 1383 subject matter expert for the Northern and Southern California teams, assisting them with annual route review implementation, SB 1383 negotiations, and SB 1383 compliance training.
Hi, I'm Megan McKenzie. I'm representing the city of Ridgecrest. Thank you guys for having me. One of the things I was going to talk about today, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to be covering just some of the basics of City of Ridgecrest and our partnership with Waste Management. And then Brad's going to take over to go into some of the more specifics on the auditing requirements, the camera technology that WM uses auditing, and then the key learnings that we've come out from our program. So next slide, please. This is just my contact information if anybody's interested in reaching out for follow-up questions or anything. I'm planning to keep my segment relatively short in the interest of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up. So next slide. So anybody who's not familiar with the city of Ridgecrest, we are very isolated out here in the Mojave Desert. We have a population of about 28,000, just a little bit over within our city limits. And we do have really extreme environment here with the high temperatures, low temperatures, but a really small average amount of rainfall. And our community is very, I don't want to say they don't like change, but they are very suspicious of changes, especially coming down from a mandated point of view. So we knew, like a lot of the other cities on the forum today, that we wanted to lead heavily with education and outreach. So I began with the city in 2021. And one of my biggest roles was figuring out what we needed to do to comply with the new requirements of SB 1383. So next slide. Luckily, we did have a long history working with WM. We executed our first franchise agreement with them back in 2011, so over 10 years of working with them as a company as our main franchise hauler. We did amend our contract in 2018 to address the requirements with AB 1826, which was the commercial organics recycling component. And then so we knew going into SB 1383 that we were going to have to amend and restate our agreement to address a lot of these new requirements for SB 1383. So we did have a consultant that helped us with that negotiation process. We began in 2021, and we went back and forth a lot with how this program was going to work. And one of the things that they presented to us for the contamination monitoring program was their smart truck technology. I don't want to take too much away from Brad's presentation because I know he's going to get a lot more in depth with the methodology. But there's basically 4 main components that we included in our contamination monitoring program. And that was the hauler route reviews, the methodology and frequency, the process of the contamination notifications, and then the disposal of the contaminated materials. And a really big part for us was the record keeping and reporting requirements. We do have a very lean staff here at the city. I'm technically the only designated city staff that's working on SB 1383. So our partnership with Waste Management was really important for us in terms of making sure we were covering not only all the requirements, but again, like some of the other jurisdictions mentioned, we really wanted to lead with an education and outreach focus. So really for those people that were putting in a best faith effort and might just be a little confused about the new habits that they would have to change and stuff, we really wanted to lead on that approach with kind of a softer approach, looking at how we could educate them in terms of moving on. So I know I might have rushed through that a little bit, and I apologize. Happy to answer any questions, but I do want to make sure Brad has enough time to get really into the methodology of it. So I will go ahead and pass it over to him, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions for the city of Ridgecrest in the Q&A portion.
Megan, thank you so much. Appreciate your partnering with us on this presentation. Really want to thank CalRecycle as well too for offering us the opportunity to present our solution, our partnership with the city of Ridgecrest. And really want to thank all the presenters. A lot of great information that was shared today. I think the goal for us today is really to present the solution that we use in Ridgecrest, share a couple of examples, and then really focus in on the reporting aspect of it, as Megan had indicated. Small staff, and how do we compile all that large amount of data that she's going to have to share with her CalRecycle partner post all of the annual route reviews. I do want to touch on real quickly at the beginning of the presentation that CalRecycle does have a best practices document that's out on the CalRecycle website. Some of the presenters and some of the solutions that were presented today are on that document, including a jurisdictional case study. So if you're really looking for some more in-depth information, I would suggest you go out to that document because there's a lot of great information, including a case study. If you want to go to the next slide for me, Darren, please. So this is where we start, right? We sit down with our jurisdiction, and in Ridgecrest case, the consultant as well, and say, hey, let's really understand what methodology you're going to use to comply, and then what is required, per those inspections and the annual reviews. City of Ridgecrest selecting the annual route reviews, and we reviewed with them kind of the information that was going to need to be obtained in each of those inspections. But we also wanted to ask and be really customer centric and saying, is there anything else that you want us to include as we are evaluating each of the containers? And is there any information that really is going to help educate their consumer base, including residents and businesses? Because as we've all heard, this is not just a commercial review anymore, it is also including in residential now. So with that, their focus for Ridgecrest was really on education. And so in the notices that we send out, and this is where we're going to be a little bit different, our notices come out post the audit that we do. So within 48 hours, we either send a letter, or if the customer has set up their preference to be email, they will receive an email notification of the notice of contamination. Our customers also can go online and actually set up a mywm.com account and actually see not only the notice, but actually see snippets of a video that you'll see later on in this presentation, so they can actually see the material being dumped. That is really where I think we differ in terms of the other solutions that have been presented. Again, neither one being right or wrong, but just a little bit different of approach. and that we were monitoring that we're actually servicing. So some of the security protocols, the randomness, right? That helps in terms of what we do when we're auditing as we're servicing. Jennifer, you want to go to the next slide, please? You can actually go one more in the essence of time. So putting cameras on trucks is not new. This is decades old, but really those cameras were kind of focused in what was going on inside the truck. So jurisdictional vehicles even could have cameras on the inside to make sure that drivers are complying with company policies or safety policies to ensure that they're being complied with. But as we started to point the cameras outwards, what we were finding is additional safety options for drivers, but also what was happening with those containers. As more and more regulation came involved, it was going to be critical for us to be able to see what was going on inside the container. And so whoever's driving, if I could ask, if you could just go ahead and click on the play button for the video. So this is our solution. So as you see, this is actually a City of Ridgecrest residential customer. We are only getting the contents of the hopper, and we're only getting the contents once it drops into the hopper. So from a privacy concern or any of the other concerns that were brought up, this was our way to really avoid that. So in this particular instance, this is a recycling container for this residential customer. And what you will really see is this is the picture right here, the still that will actually go on the notification out to the customer to say, hey, when we serviced on this day, we did notice that there were a couple of pieces of contamination. Here's for your recycling bin, here's the appropriate materials that should go in. If you would like further information, here's several resources that you can visit to get further information about it. And if you would like to speak with somebody, you can also visit our website or chat functions or other digital functions to reach out to somebody. This picture kind of says 1,000 words. This is not somebody that's habitually contaminating. They just need a little bit of education. If you look at the plastic bin at the top there, that's a plastic bin for a storage container. And more than likely, the resident was thinking, hey, this is plastic. By all the education I've received says that plastics can go into the recycling bin, so I'll throw plastics in there. This little toy toter that they had in here probably had some plastic and some metal in there, and they're thinking, okay, hey, the education material that I sent out had that material as being able to go into my recycling bin. So this is where we would work with Megan and say, okay, Megan, here are the contaminants that we're seeing, and here's where we can focus our outreach. Now, the common contaminants aren't like anybody else had said on the call. It's really bagged material. We'll see that in the next video. So now when we sit down with Megan, we can say, hey, Megan, let's focus our outreach, which would include like maybe the holiday newsletter or a billing message, or just our recycling education specialists when they go out and do technical assistance or they're visiting some type of community program can actually display like a lose the bag campaign. Or if we're seeing more of this material, we can set something up to say, hey, Megan, why don't we go ahead and do some type of information that we can share where to donate materials in the City of Ridgecrest as a way to make sure that these pieces don't end up into the recycling container. So by using the technology, by identifying the contaminant, by sending the picture, it really helps educate the City of Ridgecrest residents and their businesses about what they should place and shouldn't place in those containers. If you can go to the next slide, please. So here is a picture of So adapted from a study about changing consumer behavior, what you can see is when you can show customers or help customers really learn and understand how and what they're doing to change that behavior, that becomes a critical piece to getting behavior change. And so what we've done is we've partnered with the City of Ridgecrest to really do focused education when we're sending out these notifications for contamination. I see a couple of questions in the Q&A about, are there fees or are there fines or is there something punitive? And certainly other jurisdictions can choose to do those, but Ridgecrest really wanted to focus on, hey, this is change management. We really need to adopt behavior change. Let's do that through a variety of different methods, whether that be through a newsletter, through the notification methodology, or just generally when we get out into the community, educating them on what goes in the right container. And as we start to see that behavior change, you can see where we've piloted the WM Smart Truck technology, cart contamination has actually been reduced from 26% down to 3 to 6%. Now, we're very early on with the city of Ridgecrest, but certainly Megan is going to hold us, accountable to saying, like, are we seeing the trends from the recycling contamination where it's at now and seeing a downward trend? And we're going to show you a little bit of our dashboard that will kind of help her with that. If you'll go ahead and play the video. So in this particular video, this is a green waste container. And as you can see, I think majority of the presentations have highlighted that bags are the #1 contamination. And I can tell you that depending on the material type that you're picking up, bags seem to be the most common contamination. I do usually get a couple of questions about, Brad, in my area, we allow for some compostable bags to be placed into that green waste container because we're now SB 1383 compliant. We have a green waste container that accepts green waste and some organic material. So when our auditors are reviewing this during the training process, we do show them what compostable bags look like. But if there's ever a question, that particular instance will be pulled out of an event to review, and we'll go to another quality assurance for a secondary review before we agree that we should go ahead and send notification. If we still can't tell, we're going to err on the side of caution and not send the notification, but we will continue to kind of archive that information to make sure that if compostable bags are being used in a certain route or certain neighborhoods, that we're attuned to that and we ensure that we don't capture that in any of the notifications that might go out. All right, if you can go to the next slide, please. So, really just a compare and contrast between maybe what you've seen earlier today in terms of some of the other auditing solutions versus the camera technology. And it's really not, again, one's better than the other. It just depends on what works for your jurisdiction. As I talked about the city of Ridgecrest, what was going to be working for their jurisdiction was really a focus on education. So we really knew that identifying the material, ensuring that the customer had secondary resources to go to really understand what that material was going to be kind of a big component. If those aren't the goals and the goals are different, then you'll need to look at the solutions that are going to work best for what your goals are. But in particular, overall, when you talk about the advantages of using a camera technology versus maybe one of the other solutions that have been presented today is, one, we get to see all the material that comes into that container, that cart, that fills into the hopper. So we're not just getting kind of the top or asking people to move around or potentially, open up bags, right? We're getting all the material that's being put into that container. What you'll find is majority of the contamination is going to be at the bottom because it tends to slip down to the bottom as people put it in there. So this methodology with Smart Truck allows you to see all the contents of the container. In working with CalRecycle and working with our jurisdictions, obviously this camera technology solution has been approved as a solution, as well as the notifications that come post the audit. So you can feel confident if you do select some type of camera technology that CalRecycle has said that that is a solution that you can use for your annual route reviews, but also that the customer education pieces to that notification, whether it be a tag or an email or a letter, those are all approved as well. One key piece that I would ask if you're an elected official or someone that runs a solid waste department is, as you're evaluating these solutions, really look at how an integrated solution will work for you, because that was a key for Ridgecrest. That they said, look, we can't be, we can't go in and download the reports. We can't kind of cobble together reports from a couple different areas. We really need an easy button to be able to push and say, okay, everything that you just sent me complies with what CalRecycle is going to need. And I have that in one format. And if I do want to go in and look at the data, I have that opportunity to do so. So as you're evaluating solutions, I would look at integrated solutions, because that's going to be important in terms of saving staff time and saving time with your CalRecycle review. I'd also look at solutions that you can expand the use case. And with our Smart Truck technology, we're really going to be looking at how we can benefit residential and commercial customers from everything to billing, to missed service, to just a variety of different things, whether it be education, that we can use when we see the actual material, we see the actual stop. So more benefits to come. We also believe when we're doing this one time, right, we're conducting the audit and we're servicing at the same time, so that it's a lower greenhouse gas footprint, because again, we're doing it at the same time and not asking somebody to go back out and do it. And then everyone mentioned it. When we think of safety, safety is a pillar at WM. And so we really evaluated, was there a way that we could do this where we weren't going to have people going out into the field or having the driver get out of the truck? Couple of evolutions ago, we could have drivers getting out of the truck and taking pictures, but every time we ask a driver to get out of the truck, the incidents for an accident increase exponentially. So what we want to do is have the driver focused on driving the truck. They have no idea what's going on with the cameras. They have no interaction with the cameras. Again, everything is done post route, so they can focus on what they're there to do, which is to drive the vehicle. Of course, there's also some disadvantages that you need to think about, and that is if you don't have any current camera technology deployed, or the hauler doesn't have any camera technology deployed, there is going to be a upfront cost to get those cameras on the trucks. And then I really loved what everyone said about the pre-implementation that they've been doing to communicate with all their residents and businesses. If you don't have any type of current contamination monitoring, let's say on the commercial side, and this is going to be brand new, that implementation phase is going to be critical. And you want to look at 3 to 6 months out before you start, sending out those notifications. And so that's similar to what we did in Ridgecrest, was really work with them to ensure that they were educated about what they were going to be receiving on a quarterly basis. So if you want to go to the next slide. So real quickly, probably the heart of what we want to discuss, but this is our dashboard solution. Again, you're actually getting a whole view of both markets in Northern and Southern California in terms of what we can provide. Now, we can get this down to the jurisdictional level. We did not pull in the city of Ridgecrest because some of the subsequent tabs on this have customer data, and we're very sensitive about sharing any customer data, specifically in a forum like this. But anytime Megan needs some information or wants to look at this information for her jurisdiction, we can provide that to her, and we can actually export all of this data into reports. So it shows how many notifications were sent via email or letter, the educational types of notices that were sent, the total active customers, customers with events, and then the percentage of contamination or overage if that's a program that is in the contract. There's also about 6 other subsequent tabs on here. One of them is a route summary. So we'll be able to select on that route. We'll be able to go to the city of Ridgecrest, and Megan will be able to see, like, okay, how many of the MSW containers did we identify an event of contamination, or the recycling or organics containers. And when I talked about an integrated solution, the other tab that we have on here, actually, or there's 2 other tabs on here. One is for compliance, right? So that's a piece that you have to submit. How many customers in your jurisdiction are actually in compliance? And what is that percentage, and how many? We have a tab that shows that by jurisdiction. And then the last tab integrates all of it. So what we do is we speak with our CRM system. The data is pulled in based on all of our recycling education specialist outreach, technical assistance, emails sent, any type of communication that's sent out to those customers, and it's put in a tab by customer, and it can actually show what we did with that customer, whether it be a training event or just an outreach phone call, or maybe just sent an email. So this comes for the city of Ridgecrest and all of our WM customers who have been signed up with SB 1383 in their contract, and it's available to them. Unfortunately, right now, there is no portal for our customers to dial in, but we're working on that. So we mainly get this information to them through an export, but we're excited to be able to share more and more of these opportunities as we move along. You can go to the next slide. John, real quickly, I'll go through just some keys that we learned. So cameras are an effective solution. They're approved by CalRecycle. We think that the camera technology and the actual pictures of the material actually are going to have more of an impact, or a positive impact, to the city of Ridgecrest residents and businesses, because they'll actually be able to see what they shouldn't have thrown into that container. As you saw in the pilot program, it does contribute to decreases in contamination reduction and increased diversion. Along with our dashboard, the camera technology, and the education solution, the city of Ridgecrest now has an integrated solution that makes it easy for Megan to get information just by reaching out to her public sector manager for the city. And really the last thing that we wanted to add was similar to what everyone else is saying. You got to celebrate your successes. There's a lot of good that comes from doing these reviews, And those need to be shared either at neighborhood events or the Public Works or Solid Waste Department during their updates during public meetings, or in your customer newsletters or any outreach activity. Customers want to know when they're doing a good job or how they are going to be comparing to other jurisdictions. That is going to be another opportunity on the dashboard in future iterations that we'll be able to say, hey, compared to maybe California or compared to other jurisdictions outside of California, you know, this is what it potentially looks like. So a lot of scalability with what our solution offers. If you want to go to the next slide. I just really want to thank Megan with the City of Ridgecrest. She's a great partner with us. I really appreciate her partnering and allowing us to kind of share what we've been doing in the City of Ridgecrest, including 2 examples. I want to thank CalRecycle for the opportunity. And again, just thank all the other presenters. It was great information. And Adeline, I think I'm turning it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan and Brad, for your presentation. I would like to open it up for our final Q&A session. We do have a few more minutes left. We have been answering questions through the Q&A pane as we went along through the presentations. So thank you to the presenters for following up on those. Well, these last questions, I believe, are mostly for Brad and Megan. So if you'd like to stick around and continue listening to these answers, that'd be great. Again, I want to give a thank you to all our panelists, all our attendees who participated here today. These chats wouldn't be possible without you, and we truly appreciate the level of engagement from our stakeholders. This chat has been recorded, so if you guys want to view it at a later time, it will be up on our CalRecycle's YouTube page, along with all the other chats with CalRecycle that we've had previously. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Katie.
Yes, thank you, Addie. And just to, I'd just like to add that the recording will be on our YouTube channel, and we will send a link out for that to the SLCP listserv once we are able to get that posted. Usually takes us a week, maybe 2. If you're not already signed up for the SLCP listserv, please go to the CalRecycle website and sign up for that, because we send lots of important information out that way. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start with Susan Blackman's question. Susan, you should be able to unmute now. Please go ahead and do that and state your affiliation and ask your question.
Hi, Susan, consultant in the edible food waste recovery space. Let's see, I'm trying to remember which question. So I was wondering with the, this is for, I think for Recycle Smart, did you had to schedule your visits, which you did in-person meetings, or were you just able to show up? What was most effective? I mean, how did you make that work? Thank you.
Right, yeah, I can answer that. We mainly just showed up. Our priority was to conduct the follow-up outreach in person as close to that initial contamination observation. So we didn't really have any issues with availability. For the most part, we were able to get to the decision maker with just showing up without scheduling.
All right, thank you, Laura. Our next question is from Amanda Griffiths. Amanda, please go ahead and unmute and state your affiliation and ask your question for Brad.
Yes, hi, I'm Amanda Griffiths with the Upper Valley Waste Management Agency in Napa County. I was just curious with the cameras and garbage carts. Most often people bag them in like black plastic bags or some kind of plastic bag. I was curious how you kind of got around that and spotted if organics or recyclables were in trash.
Yeah, no, great question, Amanda. Thank you so much. So you're right. On the MSW side, there's been low kind of incidence of organic material found because most of it is bagged. I will tell you on the commercial side, a little bit easier to recognize it because it's not always bagged material, but that is something that we are evaluating as we look at this. I think the other piece is, and I think a lot of the other presenters kind of discussed it, was, you know, there's a lot of opportunity in those recycle and organics bins, right? So kind of putting focused effort there to really ensure that that material and getting good behavior change there, and then subsequently really trying to look at, you know, what comes from those trash containers, or excuse me, those MSW containers will be something we'll continue to evaluate. But great question.
All right, thank you, Brad. And up next, it looks like we have two different questions from Kirk Kunihiro. Kirk, if you could please unmute and state your affiliation and ask your first question for Brad.
Sorry, just want to jump in really quick. Brad does have to jump onto another call, unfortunately. So we have a recording of these questions that come in and if they were directed for Brad or to Waste Management, we'll make sure that we get it to them. So we're right at the end of the hour. I'm not sure if there are any closing remarks from either Kara or Ashley.
Kara, you're muted.
Okay, I think she's saying she doesn't have
Okay.
any remarks. Okay. All righty, everyone. So again, huge thank you to everyone who participated and our panelists.
Hey, Addie, I was saying I couldn't unmute. Someone just unmuted me. So I just want to express my deep appreciation to all of our presenters today. I got so much out of it, and I hope all the jurisdictions attending and callers attending did as well. So super excited. We're really looking forward to continuing to expand this conversation on container contamination monitoring and minimization, and look forward to getting more examples of what jurisdictions are doing throughout the state. Love to see more examples of oops tags so we can get those put up on our website, and anything else that you can think of to help each other. Back to you, Addie.
All right, with that, we'll go ahead and close the webinar. Thank you everyone so much and have a wonderful rest of your day.